The first universal law of motion states that an object at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. Okay? Or an object in motion is going to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. So let's talk about what we can know scientifically about the beginning of the universe, right? So, what we know, scientifically speaking, about the beginning of the universe is known as the Big Bang, right? So, how we can find out about the Big Bang is we realize that the universe itself is expanding at a particular rate. So, we can gauge the speed at which it's expanding and the speed at which it is accelerating, and then we just reverse that direction back to a point in time where the universe was still with no motion whatsoever in a one-dimensional plane of space and time. Right? So what that particular object was like this eraser. Okay? So the universe was in a state where it was stationary. It was not moving, right? So based on the universal law of motion, that means that the inertia was stationary and therefore it will remain stationary. Okay? So forever and ever, that matter and energy would remain stationary unless acted upon by an outside force. So what we can learn from that, right? So here is this object. It is stationary, okay? In order for this object to move, an outside force, myself, has to act upon it to move it. If it were to just be sitting in my hand, not moving at all, it would remain seated in that hand unless something outside of it acted upon that object, okay? So we know that two things. We know that all the matter and energy and whatnot in the universe was in a single non-moving location. And we know now that all the matter and stuff in the universe is now in motion. Okay. So in order for that stationary inertia to be broken, that means that an outside force had to have initiated that first motion, right? That's what we call the Big Bang or the Great Expansion. So something outside of the universe exists. That's what we can find, and that's what we can figure out by just using that logical deduction. Okay, so what we do know also about the universe is it is immensely vast. We don't know how vast the universe is, and the fact that the speed of it is expanding faster than the speed of light would indicate to us that the initial thing, the initial spark that created the expansion, that outside force, was not just a weak force, but it was an extremely powerful force. And so, what we can conclude from those two statements is two things. One, something outside of the universe exists. That something came into contact with the stationary universe and created an expansion. And then, based on the sheer mass and volume and size of our universe, we can then conclude that the universe, or that force, is extremely powerful. So what do we conclude from those two things? That something exists outside of our universe, and that something that does exist outside of our universe is immensely, immeasurably powerful. Now we can take this a step further. Okay, so there are plenty of videos, and I can share a couple links with you. There are certain universal constants that, if they were off by 1 percentage point either direction, that would mean that our universe could not exist. So the one that I'm going to talk about today is kind of the laws of gravity, right? So if gravity was a certain percentage weaker, that means that none of the matter in the universe could have had the ability to stick together. So that means no stars, no planets, no meteors, no nothing, right? Now, if the pull of gravity was a percentage point stronger, the expansion of the universe could not happen, and in fact, it would go out and collapse right back in on itself. All right, and there are about another 7 insanely finely tuned universal constants that all exist in order for our universe to be able to A, just exist in the way that it does, and B, be able to have a planet on it that could support something as fragile and intricate as life like we have here on Earth. So the likelihood of that happening by an extremely powerful outside force is very, very slim. Okay, so what would be more likely is the fact that that outside powerful force had a hand in creating and designing the laws of nature that we can observe, the universal constants that we have here in the universe. So, in order for that strong, powerful force to be able to know how to finely tune our universe, that indicates that entity is extremely intelligent. So we can conclude that there's something exists outside of this universe, that it is extremely powerful, and that is extremely intelligent. So intelligence, generally speaking, presupposes some degree of free will and free will choice and decision. So if something outside of our universe has the is powerful and intelligent, that means that it had the choice whether or not to create or to give the universal constants to our universe. And in that statement, that means that 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 entity has the ability to care. So, just from observing our own particular nature, now again, I know this doesn't exactly specify that this force outside of us has to have our same nature. However, just using our own human logic and human understanding is in order for me to sit down and compose a piece of music, or to sit down and draw a beautiful piece of artwork, or to plant a garden and make it beautiful, that presupposes, and again, I had a choice to do so, that presupposes that that's something that I'm creating is something that I love, right? We all inherently understand that when someone creates a masterpiece, it's an expression of themselves, it's an expression of the love that they have for that creation. Having all that in mind, we can make some really interesting conclusions about the nature of the uh, entity that exists outside of our universe, which is outside of space and time. We can understand that it's a very powerful entity, a very powerful being. We can understand that it is very, very intelligent. And then we can start to conclude that that being is highly loving, right? If you take a look just outside at a sunset, if you take a look at your newborn baby, if you take a look even at flowers, or even if you're a scientist and you're unpeeling all of that and you're looking at the structure of DNA and protons and neutrons and electrons, what you see is a beautiful, beautiful, finely tuned universe. And to me, that shows so much love that has been created by that entity that exists outside of time and space. Okay, so on these next videos, what I want to do is I want to start to unpack that, and we'll talk about what, is that God? Is that just some random thing that started the universe? Of course, as a theist, I'm going to argue that the force that started the universe, like I said, powerful, exists outside the universe, extremely intelligent, and extremely loving. And then what we're going to do is we're going to assume that that thing who loves us is going to reveal itself to us. Okay. And then, based on the understanding, the scientific and the philosophical understanding that we have of what that outside force might be like, we're going to peel away the layers to determine if it's at all explained in any of today's major world religions. So, we'll examine Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and some Eastern religion types of concepts. And then we'll kind of decide whether or not the Bible is explaining to us um, something that we would theoretically understand to be that outside force. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one.